Thank you to the Democratic candidates that have come here, that are exploring a run for governor or are running for governor. I would like to thank our forum co-sponsors, Westport DTC, Ellen Lautenberg, Wilton DTC Chair Tom Dubin, Weston DTC Chair Amy Shapiro, Trumbull DTC Chair Tom Kelly, and Easton DTC Chair Adam Holberg. And Indivisible Connecticut 4 President Joe Luciano. Joe, thank you. I would like to acknowledge our Democratic public officials, our Fairfield First Selectman, Mike Tetra. Mike, thank you. Thank you for your effective leadership. Our state representative in the 133rd District in Fairfield, Kristen McCarthy-Vahey. And our great candidate running for state representative, Caitlin Clarkson-Pereira in the 132nd District. And Ashley Gaudiano running for state representative in the 134th District, which includes Trumbull and Fairfield. I'd like to also introduce State Representative from Westport, Jonathan Steinberg. And Carolyn Vermont, who is exploring a run for State Senate in the 23rd District. Carolyn. Our job is to help re-elect these candidates and elect them so that they will represent our principles and our values. And now I would like to introduce Melissa Kane to start the forum.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks to everybody for being here today. I want to thank all of our candidates, whom I will introduce in a moment. Tell you a little bit about the format for the forum this afternoon. There'll be no formal opening statement from any of our candidates. We'll have about 6 to 7 rounds of audience-sourced questions. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer the questions, and the moderators may choose to follow up the question with a 1 minute another 1 minute follow-up for the candidates. A timer will hold up somewhere in the front row for each of the candidates. Let the candidates know when they have 30 seconds left and when their time is up. The order in which the candidates are sitting corresponds to the random choosing of numbers that dictated the order in which questions will be answered. The candidate who went first, the first candidate to answer our first question will be Joe Ganim. He will go last for the second question, and so on. So I would love to introduce these candidates. I mentioned Mr. Ganim. Next to him is Sean Connolly. Next to him is Guy Smith. Then Luke Bronin. Jonathan Harris, can't see very well. Susan Weissowitz, and Ned Lamont. Thank you all for being here. I'm just going to launch in. I'm going to launch in with our first question because we want to be able to get to so many. And this is actually one that Steve and I had for the candidates. The eventual Democratic nominee for governor faces an incredibly tough race. So we'd really like to know why you're the candidate who can win this office. Why are you electable? Let's start with you, Mr. Gallo.
Thanks. I don't know if the microphone, I don't know if it works, but it's my pleasure to join you along with really some outstanding candidates running for governor. I think one thing that we all agree, I think this party is well served now, not only by the makeup of town committees and people who have become so active and making a difference in the democratic process. I hope favorably for us as Democrats, but the candidates that are running here and those who are on top of the office. So it's my pleasure to join you. You know me as maybe as mayor of Bridgeport, but driving over here a couple miles from next door, I remember growing up, at least in the summers in Fairfield Beach. Family business, my grandfather started here, still on Kings Highway, Ganem's Garden Center. Just need to tell you, I worked there as a kid. Part of it was shoveling manure, which I think we'd all agree was a great background for getting into elected politics. But having said that, it is an important election. And at this time, you'd say, why is it, how do we think that we can win? We have some things stacked against us, and I think we have some things going against us. First and foremost, I do think we have the best candidates with the best depth. I personally think I bring the best experience, come somewhat uniquely situated, having some 14 years in government, collectively running the largest city, taking it initially as a young mayor from fiscal crisis, somewhat not too dissimilar, though even more dramatic, bankruptcy. Our state is now in fiscal crisis. I think people that are going to want to allow us to continue as Democrats to lead from the governor's office, from the House, and from the Senate, are going to want to only have experience, the background, and the problem-solving capability to get the job done. I also think it's going to be also important to have a candidate from this part of the state. Republicans are likely going to have a Republican candidate for governor from this part of the state. Likely going to be a chief elected official from one of the towns or cities. We're going to be toe-to-toe with them. If we think for a moment that we're going to get by with just saying we're Democrats and we should win, without being able to demonstrate not only a vision for Connecticut, but a better vision for Connecticut, as I say, putting Connecticut back on track and building a new Connecticut economy that works for everyone, we're not going to make it work. My time's up. I'll share more about that with you in some of the other questions.
Thank you. Mr. Connolly?
Thank you, Steve, and listen, thanks to all of you for having me here today. I am Sean Conley, and I love Connecticut. And I am proud to be here this afternoon with a great partner, a partner of passion, of energy, and of compassion, my wife Carol, who is here with me. I will also share and take a few seconds of my time to say that Carol has been here before during college. She won actually the Fairfield Invitational in her race as a runner. And so she's happy to be back here so she can show me that her name truly was up on the wall for breaking a record. So glad she's here with me. But you know, I'm somebody who brings something unique among my fellow candidates. Three tiers of experience that no other candidate has, and that is my military experience, having served on active duty for 7+ years in the Army and continuing to serve in the Army Reserve today as a lieutenant colonel and a recent graduate of the Army War College. Second is my business background, having gone to a business school and having served at Pratt & Whitney as the Global Ethics and Compliance Officer. And third is my senior executive experience running a state agency, the Department of Veterans Affairs here in Connecticut, on a lower and lower budget, to get things done for our veterans, working with our legislature, working with both houses, working with both parties. And so putting that experience to bear in the really first, second, third priorities that I've talked about since I launched my exploratory campaign in October, which is our state's economy. You know, that's why we're in this race. That's why Carol and I jumped into this race, and that's to ensure and expand the Connecticut opportunity that the last 3 generations of my family enjoyed right here in Connecticut. I'm the son and grandson of Irish immigrants. My grandparents got jobs at Pratt & Whitney in the 1940s. My father came 52 years ago, started his own business. We want the same for Sean and Brendan, our 2 boys, and that's why we moved back here after serving on active duty, to raise our 2 boys and to now ensure and expand that opportunity, a fair shot for everyone, no matter who you are. And that comes down to our economy, and that's why I launched my economic plan on January 9th when I declared my candidacy for governor. I'm the only candidate, I believe, to have done that, and I look forward to talking more about my economic plan going forward. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. Again, I'm going to mention the question before Mr. Smith speaks. Why are you electable? Why are you electable? That is the question.
Why am I electable? Because I'm not a career politician, and I'm not a career candidate. Everywhere I go in this state, you say Hartford and people groan. The media's even started to call it the groan factor. I spent the last 4 decades being a senior officer of 2 global corporations, one headquartered in Norwalk. I ran AmeriCares, the disaster relief humanitarian organization, and I've been to every hellhole on the planet. I know how to help people. And I worked at the White House for President Clinton, directly for President Clinton, not just on the staff. So the arc of my career gives me a set of experiences that this state needs at this moment in its history. We must do it differently. I will not raise taxes. Tolls are a bad idea if you have to pay, but they're not a bad idea if people from Massachusetts have to pay, and I have a plan for us to do that. We must find a third way and bring people together. I know how to bring people together. This is what this state needs at this moment. We're going to see, and we have been seeing, what's happening in Hartford, what's happening in Washington, the partisanship, and I hope it doesn't happen tomorrow when they vote on Andrew McDonald. But if it does, and we sink into that kind of homophobia and racism, when I'm governor, I will reappoint Andrew McDonald, renominate him. We must do it differently. And I got a whole lot more to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Bronin, why are you electable? Why are you the candidate who can win this office?
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you to all the towns for hosting this, and it's great to see a crowd this big on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. I think that's one of the reasons that we should feel confident that we've got a ton of energy in this party. You saw it last week when Democrats flipped the district that went Republican by 25 points in Stratford and went blue a couple of Tuesdays ago. Look, if you look at what happened in municipals last year and in the race in Stratford this year, I think what is going to be the key to Democrats winning is, number one, being honest and transparent about the challenges that we face, being serious about laying out a plan, and also being unafraid to take the Republicans head on, to tie them to the leader of their party, Donald Trump, and to blow up the myth that Republicans are fiscally responsible. You know, over the last couple of years, I've had to tackle an unprecedented fiscal crisis. And I've had to do it by being willing to tell some hard truths and do some really hard things. And I think in this race, we're going to have to be willing to not just say what we think people want to hear, but to honestly answer what we think we can do in this time of challenge to put our state on the long-term path to growth. I'm prepared to do that. But I also think that we need somebody who's got a record of governing with heart and governing on principle. And as mayor, I've been proud to stand up to Donald Trump as they've bullied cities on immigration. I've been proud to stand up and defend Planned Parenthood as they've worked to defund Planned Parenthood. I've been proud to take up the mantle of climate stewardship and put together a comprehensive climate action plan at the local level as they try to remove climate change from the federal government websites. And I've been proud to stand up to the NRA and say we don't need the NRA to have a formal role in Connecticut's firearms permitting process. So if Connecticut is looking for somebody who has made change, who's made tough decisions, who's willing to tell the truth, and has got a record of standing up for progressive values, and I think we can put that candidate forward, we can win.
Thank you, Mr. Bronin. Mr. Harris.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Do you remember the question?
Yes, I do. I'll wing it. That's right. It's great to see this. We saw in Stratford, we saw in the elections last year, energized activity on the ground, plus good candidates. Hard work yield the victory. That's what we have here. We have the base. But we cannot just run against Donald Trump. We have to be able to show a pathway out. We have to show a vision that we all share. And I believe, you'll see there's a lot of talented people up here, but I believe that I'm the best candidate because I have the broadest base of experience, public and private sector. Mayor of West Hartford, state senator, council of House Democrats, deputy treasurer of the state, commissioner of consumer protection. I also have been in private practice of law representing businesses, working families, and I had an economic development and real estate business. I actually was regulated by consumer protection, then I became the regulator. I've literally been on both sides of the desk. I see what has worked, what hasn't worked. I understand government. You put that in connection together with a second characteristic that I've had. Throughout those jobs, I've been able to bring people together to create practical solutions, common sense solutions to the problems that we've been facing. I got West Hartford out of the fiscal crisis in a recession after 2001, preserving the quality of our schools, our front yard services, and doing it in a way that brought people together. And in the midst of that, we were the first municipality in this state to have public pre-kindergarten. Looking forward in investments. I did economic development throughout West Hartford Center, Blueback Square, all of our areas to expand our tax base, to create jobs. And let's face it, what we need to show is a vision of education and jobs. You do that right, we can resolve a lot of other issues. I've done it. That's why I feel like I'd be a good governor for you.
Well, good afternoon, Democrats. My name is Susan Weissowitz, and I am exploring a run for governor. We are at a critical moment in our state's history, and we need a special leader that has the right experience. And here's why I believe I would be the best and most electable candidate. We've seen what happens when you send someone to Washington to do a job, an important job that has not one whit of government experience. Government experience is critical for our next governor to have, because he or she will have to work with our state legislature, our United States Congress, in a collaborative and effective way. And I've been proud to serve in our state legislature and as Secretary of the State for 12 years. I helped transform our voting system with bipartisan support and worked with our U.S. Congress for the $33 million to fund that transformation. I also have heavy-duty business experience in the private sector. That's important because our next governor has to get our state's economy back on track. I've spent the past 7 years working with more than 80 businesses homegrown to Connecticut across our state to help them grow thousands of good-paying jobs, which is really important for our state and has given me some insight into what we need to do to fix our economy and make it work for everyone. And I am unique amongst the talented people at this table in that I have run and won 3 times statewide before with a Republican at the top of the ticket. So I believe I'm the best candidate and look forward to earning your support. Thank you so much.
Well, good afternoon, fellow candidates. A long time no see. I'm delighted to be here in Fairfield County. It's nice to be close to home. And I'd like to give a special shout out to Indivisible and the new energy and passion that you're bringing to our democratic principles and getting out to vote and making sure we win in November. Thanks for everything that you are doing. So Amy and I, my wife and I, were thinking the other day that we are about the same age as our kids are today when we moved to Connecticut in the early 80s, mid-80s. And we wouldn't have moved anywhere else. We were here because we could go get a pizza up in New Haven, we could get down to New York and party. It was a great place for a balance between business and lifestyle. It was a place we wouldn't be anywhere else. And now our kids are thinking about where they want to be. I'm in New York, and I think you all have the same quandary. And I think the political class in Hartford has let things slip. And we're not going to let that happen. It takes longer now to get up to a New Haven. It takes longer to get down to New York than it did back in the 80s. It takes longer to get from New Haven down to New York than it did in 1910. That's a failure of leadership. We've had a budget crisis that has consumed this state and cast a pall of pessimism. You want to know why you need somebody to win? Melissa, I think you need somebody who hasn't been part of that Hartford political class. You need somebody who's going to bring a fresh change to what we want to do. Somebody who you know is not afraid to challenge the status quo. You remember in the Lieberman campaign some years ago, somebody took on his own party when it came to doing what was right and standing for our progressive values. My whole life, I've been a business creator, job creator. I'm ready to take that debate to the Republicans in November and make sure the Democrats win. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Connolly, many say the budget crisis is because of our unfunded pension liability. How would you address it?
Thank you. I'll refer to my economic plans available on my website at connolly4ct.com. And there's no magic wand, obviously. There are no overnight solutions. It's a multi-pronged approach. First, from our state employees, our state workers, as Commissioner of Connecticut's Department of Veterans Affairs, I work with some tremendous state workers, serving those who have served, serving our veterans. Our state workers came to the table this summer and fall, and they made significant changes to the way we move forward. Significant changes in adding the number of years of service, significant changes in moving towards 401ks from defined contributions. And so we ought not vilify our state workers. We ought to honor the commitments that we made, but we do have to make some changes. And so first, we're going to have to be looking at our state government and how efficient we can be. As the Commissioner of the Department of Veterans Affairs, my budget went down each year. Our resources were reduced each year. but we still moved our agency forward in serving those who have served by being innovative, by being creative, by bringing to bear my military experience and my corporate experience to be more efficient in the things that we do, bringing lean initiatives so that we can continue to serve our veterans in a more efficient way. And we've got to do that across state government. We've got to do that in each of our state agencies, finding ways to be more efficient, to take out the non-value-added pieces to the puzzle and continuing to do things more efficiently. One example is our temporary housing facility at the Department of Veterans Affairs. We had a 20-plus page application process, which was not just paper, but it was all the process around that. And we brought people to the table, and we leaned that down to 6 pages, and we leaned the process down. So we've got to do that across state government. Same with finding efficiencies with our municipalities. From the state government to our towns and cities, we've got to encourage, incentivize, and recognize that there's going to be less municipal aid going forward. So we've got to merge and scale those duplicated efforts down to be more efficient with our towns and cities all across the state. Many more areas to look at from a growth perspective so that we can increase our revenue going forward, but that's just a start. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. Mr. Smith, same question. Many say the budget crisis is mainly because of the unfunded pension liability. How would you address it?
You know, this state is the wealthiest state in the country. We have the most educated workforce of any state in the country. I don't think that unions and teachers and state workers should be vilified and be the enemy. They're not the enemy. Actually, they've given back, and they've given back. Yes, we have fiscal issues, and we have enormous fiscal resources. What we need to do is grow our way out of this. We need to bring jobs back into the state. We need to recruit millennials into the state. We need to provide them when they won't come home from college. And you know how IBM goes to college campuses and says, come work for us, we're a great company. The state of Connecticut needs to do that, but not with a brochure. We need to go and say, you come here, we'll give you a first-time home buyer credit. You come here. You know, I get 3 things when you go around the state that create nods. No taxes, up, people nod. Here's another one. You drive around the state and see empty buildings everywhere, right? Watch them, all over the state. Some of them have been there longer than a lot of these folks have been running for governor. You go to that millennial and you say you get a home buyer credit, and we'll put your startup in one of these new buildings. We'll give you free office space for 5 employees up to 2 years. Think Silicon Valley. Think Route 128 in Boston. We need hundreds of these kind of things. Bring people back into the state. We're losing people out of the state. That commission, that fiscal commission the other day from CEO, give the rich people a tax cut and raise taxes on the middle class and the poor people. That's not the answer. We must grow.
Thank you. Mr. Bronin, would you reopen the CBAC agreement?
I'm sorry, I thought I was going to ask the previous question. Would I reopen the CBAC agreement? Look, governors can't unilaterally open agreements. The prior administration signed a 10-year deal. I will tell you, I would not have signed a 10-year deal. That's not necessarily a popular position, but I don't think we're in a position as a state to make a 10-year commitment when we face tremendous uncertainty. Some of the candidates up here would tell you that they would never ask our state employees to come back and be part of a conversation about a long-term solution. I can't make that promise. I might well ask them to come back to the table, but I can promise you that just as our negotiations, as we faced a massive fiscal crisis in the city I lead, were respectful and ultimately led to dramatic change and structural reform achieved around the negotiating table, our negotiations at the state level would be respectful and would aim at that real structural change. I do want to say real quick on that last part, look, pension funding is one of the big reasons we're in this mess. And let's not lose sight of the fact that we didn't fund our pensions for year after year after year when we had Republican governors. We were sitting on surpluses. And I'll give you a specific thing of what I think we should do. One of our biggest unfunded liabilities is in the Teachers Retirement Fund. We have a fundamental obligation to fund that. One of the things we ought to do is take the Connecticut lottery and dedicate that revenue or transfer that asset to the teacher's retirement fund. I don't know if you all remember, but when the lottery was set up, that money was supposed to be dedicated to education in the first place. Well, that's one way you can do it and make real progress on our unfunded liability. But the real challenge to go along hand in hand with funding our pensions is we've got to grow. I hope we get to talk about this later, but to me, the three keys to growth in this state are transportation, especially rail, starting with the New York to New Haven train line, which would be transformative for every community along it and for much of the rest of the state. Higher education, I'll talk more because my time is up, and making sure we've got strong and vibrant cities that can help drive growth.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, same question. Would you reopen the CBAC agreement?
I would honor the agreement. Let me tell you what I've done in the past when it comes to collective bargaining. As mayor of West Hartford in the midst of the fiscal crisis, the Republicans, the so-called fiscal conservatives, something that we have to take back, the argument that we are, with our progressive values, our democratic values, we are fiscally responsible. They didn't have a fire contract for 4 years. We not only said collective bargaining was right, we brought everybody to the table, labor and management, and we negotiated a good deal that was fair to the people protecting us, that saved the taxpayers' dollars, and that was forward-looking in the way it's structured our fire service. You can work, management and labor can work together. You can bring them together. When I was Commissioner of Consumer Protection, down 25% of our workforce, we figured out how to do more with less and do it better. We focused on what was important: protecting consumers, protecting businesses, public health and safety. We focused on that. We worked with our personnel. We got people together through reorganization, through process improvement, through technology, use of it in a more efficient way. We were able to take on new things like the cutting-edge medical marijuana program, providing important health care to veterans suffering from PSTD, from people suffering from cancer, in hospice, kids seizing dozens of times a day with epilepsy. We were able to do that by bringing people together. So we need to have a continual dialogue with the people that are providing the frontline services in our state, people that are doing very good jobs at service delivery under really tough conditions. So the bottom line on this is, besides the growth and dealing with the pension in much more creative ways, we have $18 billion of assets. We can actually monetize some of those assets. We can come up with extra cash flows so that we not only make our pension payment, like I did that hard choice as mayor of West Hartford in fiscal crisis, we can help bend down the curve with additional payments.
Thank you. Ms. Vysowicz, would you make municipalities pay for the teacher retirement benefits?
Well, let me answer all three of those questions. I think we need to fully fund our teacher retirement system. The state took it over in the 1970s, and we need to honor that. I believe we should honor our CBAC agreement, because it is not the fault of the teachers or the state employees that towns, the state, did not fully fund those benefits. And it was Republican governors, Democratic governors, Republican and Democratic legislators that underfunded or didn't fund properly. And so the question is, how do we get out of this financial mess that we're in? And I think it's a combination of strategies. It's new revenue sources. And we need to, I'm a supporter of electronic tolling because we've left billions off the table that we could have been investing in infrastructure and economic growth to grow good jobs and to grow our economy. We also have to do more with less across state government. When I was Secretary of the State, when I started, we had 110 employees. When I left 12 years later, we had 70, but we provided more services in a more efficient way because we used technology and we cross-trained people and we treated our state employees with the respect and dignity that they deserve. I think it's important to choose your state treasurer very carefully, because if we can increase the investment on our pension assets, that will also help fix our long-term liability issue. And I look forward to talking more about how we can grow our economy to get out of this mess. Thank you so much.
Ms. Bysiewicz, if I could please follow up with you, would you transfer teacher retirement benefit to municipalities?
I think that municipalities are now cash-strapped and because of lesser funding from the state, and it's not something that they could do immediately because they are certainly not prepared and haven't planned for it.
Thank you. Mr. Lamont, the same question. Would you transfer the teacher retirement benefit to the municipalities?
Steve, I would not transfer that obligation to municipalities. The municipalities are having a hard time keeping their head above water right now. You can't throw that on them at this point, and it'd be the wrong thing to do. But we do have a pension crisis in this state, and you better address it completely. First of all, you got to know what it's not. It's not the fault of collective bargaining. Collective bargaining would be how we get through this. That's how we sit down at the table and collectively bargain and work through this. Most of the Tier 1 folks, those who were hired a long time ago, we didn't set aside any money for them. That's where almost all of the pension liability is, and that was before collective bargaining. Number two, don't blame the state employees, don't blame the teachers. They made their commitment to us, we honor our commitment to them. And we have not honored our commitment to them. Over the last couple of generations, we did not contribute to the pension fund. You know, John Rowland, they had surpluses. Did they take that money and contribute to the fund? No. I'll tell you one person who did contribute to the fund the last 7 years was Dan Malloy. And if we had done that for the last 25 years and not the last 7 years, we wouldn't be in this pickle we are today. And yes, there's also, we can do some real reforms that help lower the cost over time. It took us 30, 40 years to get to this mess. We're not going to solve it in the next 10 years. We're not going to be able to pay $5 billion into the teacher's pension fund when that cliff comes due. We're going to stretch out those obligations over a period of time and honestly bargain the long-term changes we have to make. Most important is we know what this budget's going to look like every 2 years. We can book it out. We can take it to the bank. We have that certainty going forward. That's what the business community needs. That's what your mayors need. That's what your state employees need. And that's what I will do for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gannon, are you in favor of making the municipalities pay for the teacher retirement benefit?
No, absolutely not, and fought against it in this last legislature, and I'll tell you, anybody that thinks that's the answer is short-sighted and misguided. The truth of it is, municipalities have never had the necessary say over that, no one. Two, it would force cities and towns like Fairfield, Bridgeport and others to maybe lay off teachers because of the increased cost that we just couldn't absorb in our budget. So that's just wrong. The whole concept of discussion about the state budget, the challenges, and whether the CPAC agreement or pensions and all that, they're all parts of it. But the complicated aspects of a large public sector budget, I think, includes looking at all of those. You can't have a state pension fund predicated on an 8% return. I said to them when they told us that, if you get 8% of your return, I want to put my money in with you. But it's those type of false predictions, it's failure to really rely on predictable sources of revenue and really fairly and transparently estimate your expenditures that's caused us over years, maybe decades, as a state to get into what I call a fiscal crisis. We're going to turn this thing around. You're not going to cut your way out of it. You're going to reorganize certainly. You're going to reduce your expenditures. You're going to look at predictable and other sources of revenue in order to balance this budget so the cities and towns and citizens all across Connecticut can have reliable state government that can meet the services that we need. I was at a press conference earlier, I know I came a little bit late, with Senator Blumenthal about the opioid crisis and how that's a challenge with 1,000 people dying a day in Connecticut. And when we start to cut back on even any element of social services that talks about or fails to meet the tender needs that we have in Connecticut, we're failing as a state. So we need to write the state budget first so we can meet the needs of the state of Connecticut. We've done it 14 times without raising, 10 years in a row without raising taxes, and look forward to help put Connecticut back on track. Thanks.
Thank you all so much. In many ways, Connecticut exemplifies a huge divide between rich and poor in this country. Mr. Smith, the first question is to you. What would you specifically do to change this?
The divide between rich and poor. A centuries-old issue. Well, like I said, I'm not going to raise taxes. Well, some people say, well, what about the 1%? Well, that's 30% of the money that comes into the state treasury. And if we did that, then we'll move to Florida. I know you really won't, but people like me that would. So what do? We must find a third way. Every time you go to Hartford, there's only two solutions. You raise taxes or you kill teachers. Raise taxes or kill state workers. That's not the way. We have to look at things differently. Specific example, I'm going to turn the DOT upside down. And I don't mean the people driving the snowplows. Here's what I mean. Why does it take twice as much money and twice as long to build a bridge in Connecticut as it does in Massachusetts? It's just as cold, it's just as hot, and the trucks are just as heavy. Another specific example, everybody drives 95. Exit 12, the bridge over Old Kings Highway. I announced in early January, and since that day to this morning, there have been scaffolding and lights, and lanes are redirected, and not a single day has one piece of work been done there. I don't know why, I don't care why. It's not how you run a state government, and if you look at every part of state government with that kind of lens, we don't need to raise taxes. What we need is different and better, and that's what I will bring to Hartford.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
I'm sorry. To me?
No, I said thank you.
Oh, I got
No follow-up at this point. Mr. Bronin, I'll ask you the same question. What would you do specifically to help bridge that divide?
So I serve as mayor of a great city that's also one of the poorest communities in the country. We have a neighborhood not far from City Hall where the median household income is about $12,000, and where unemployment on paper is 27%. In reality, it's probably closer to 50. So I live this divide and serve a community that lives this divide every day. We have what Martin Luther King called islands of poverty in a sea of material prosperity. I think the number one thing is we need to make sure that our education cost sharing formula adequately reflects changes in our communities and adequately reflects need. The single most important route to opportunity is through education, especially when you're dealing with generation after generation of poverty. So that is the single most important thing. I also think that there are ways to create pathways to opportunity for young people, no matter what community they're living in. I think we've completely under-recognized the power of vocational technical schools. We have tens of thousands of jobs being created in the coming years in advanced manufacturing, and yet every one of those advanced manufacturers is raising their hand and saying, we've got jobs, but we don't have a workforce. There is no reason that we can't be making sure that those kids who may not be on a path to 4 years and don't need to get 4-year education to get a career with good pay and good benefits, don't have a path through VOTEC or community colleges, or making sure that our state college and university system are providing that assistance to students, no matter their background, no matter where they come from, so that they can get on that path. I also think that this is one of those third rails in Connecticut politics, but if we were building a state from scratch, we wouldn't take a state of 3.5 million people and carve it into 169 towns. We have to recognize that we're all in this together, and we need a governor who's willing to talk about that.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, do you have a specific plan, and could you tell us about it, for investing in Connecticut cities? How do we make them drivers for economic development? How do we revitalize them?
Vibrant cities are crucial to the success of our state, without a doubt. One of the pathways I have to get us out of this rut, the first we talked about a little bit is getting out of the fiscal crisis. And the third pathway is actually changing our education strategy so it's more tied to not only the jobs of today, but of tomorrow. More pipelines into those jobs. But the second pathway I talk about is changing our strategy of economic development, from one that has too often relied on top-down, big amounts of money, big tax breaks, picking winners and losers, to one that's more bottom-up and organic. That's what we did in West Hartford. We literally spread out the map of our town, and we said, how can we incent private sector investment in all areas of town? How can we get out of the way in places where it makes sense? West Hartford Center, who's been there? People have been up? Right. The two most important things that created West Hartford Center were allowing outdoor dining and relaxing parking ratios. That allowed money to come in, jobs to come in, restaurants to develop, businesses to be successful. We had 2 boarded up car dealerships, polluted 1950s model, right off our town center. We said, what can we do to attract investment there? We changed our grid system. We did traffic improvements up to 5 miles away to move cars. We figured out how to get more bike traffic in the area. We said we're going to prospectively change zoning so that people can invest and get better cash flows out of the property. We were willing and did throw in municipal assets so we could master plan the area and not just have one building pop up. This organic bottom-up development can be used more in our cities and not the top-down economic development. That sometimes has to happen. You got to be able to sit down and negotiate with big companies. But that should be the secondary strategy, not the primary strategy.
Thank you. Ms. Bysowitz, how would you plan to make our cities drivers for economic development, but also?
When you ask about revitalizing our cities in Connecticut, you're also asking how do we keep our young people in Connecticut. So I'm a mom, my husband and I have 3 children. They're 25, 23, and 21, and 2 of them are in New York City because that's where the good paying jobs are. So if we want to keep young people in our cities, we have to encourage transit-oriented development. Young people want to be in cities where there's affordable housing, where there's public transportation, where they could walk to work, where there are fun things to do. And if we are successful at that, our big employers like GE and like Aetna will want to stay here because they will have the talent. And so it's important that we, in addition to focusing on affordable housing and transit-oriented development in cities, we also invest in education and create partnerships between our community colleges and state colleges and universities and businesses in the state so that our young people know if they graduate with an advanced manufacturing degree from a community college, they have a great paying job waiting for them at Electric Boat. Or a young person graduates with an engineering degree from UConn, they know they have a job waiting for them at UTC. They will want to stay here. And by the way, if our young people are staying here, our big employers will stay here because we will have that talent, our cities will be revitalized, and the baby boomers and retirees will want to stay here because their kids and grandkids are here. And that's how I would do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Lamont, I'm going to ask you a similar question. I would like to know how you would address our inner cities, our cities, the wealth gap and revitalization, but I'd like you to also focus on what transportation, we've had this conversation, what transportation can do to help with that as well.
Okay, you got a lot there,
I
2
got a lot.
minutes. I'm going to be a champion for our cities, Melissa, not at the expense of our towns, not at the expense of our suburbs. So this is a small state, as has been said. We're in this together. We're going to form the way we raise revenue so we can honor our commitments to our cities and going forward. Transportation will be a big part of that because major transportation infrastructure in our main cities, growth around there, housing, affordable housing so people can get in and out will bring our cities back to life. And that will mean good paying jobs. I'm the first candidate in an awful long time who spent most of their lives creating businesses, creating good paying jobs, good salaries, strong benefits. And when it comes to the income gap, which is, I think, the civil rights issue of our day, it starts with good paying jobs. I'm going to be a champion for this state, what it takes to create those jobs. I will also be a champion for a fair economy. When I say a fair economy, you're going to have a business guy who knows what it takes to create jobs, who also will be a champion of a $15 minimum wage. I know what a $15 minimum wage means. I know what it means to that single mom in Hartford who can't get by otherwise without it, is going, we need them involved. I will be a champion of paid family medical leave. The business guy, I can make that case. And I'll tell you again what that means. That means that that mom will not have to choose between taking care of a sick child and going to work. We need everybody involved. We need them all in the game. We need them working. We want to make sure they have the opportunity to work. I think with that, plus the ability to have affordable health care, we're going to raise up everybody in this state. The $15 minimum wage is not just for folks at the minimum wage level, raises up everybody to the middle class. We're going to fight for the middle class every day in this state. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ganim, how are you going to bring jobs back to Connecticut? Not specifically to the cities. I'd like to hear, a plan for rural, but I'd also like you to address being in Fairfield County. Again, transportation is a huge part of this, so I'd really like your thoughts on it.
Transportation is one of, if not one of the core elements for quality of life in general and for retaining and for bringing jobs back in. But I do have to say, I think the cities are critically important. And as complex as they are, I believe they can be and should be the engine that drives, in many ways, the new Connecticut economy. But you won't have those. You won't have the real results unless we do deal with the crumbling infrastructure and a better transportation system, the I-95 parking lot, as I like to refer to it from here. So that is a huge challenge. In the cities alone, there are more that needs to be done, but as a state policy, we have to look at the things that have happened and what we've done wrong, whether it was mentioned before, the GEs, even Alexion or Aetna that we talked about or are leaving, and to focus on ways in which we can make it a more attractive place for all of us to not just live, but to do business or to set up businesses. I will tell you, in attracting jobs to Connecticut, we have a New York company that's investing $400 million in the Bridgeport downtown area. PSG, now going to be the largest power source in the area, is investing $500 million, a New Jersey company. And the list goes on with regards to companies and people coming in. For infrastructure alone, it's not a luxury to say we want to build or create or recreate a antiquated transportation system. We're right, we have to invest in rail and in transit, and understand that even without doing that, we need to invest in what's crumbling infrastructure just to maintain our highways and our bridges. So it has to be an element of growth for Connecticut and for job creation. Thanks.
Mr. Connolly, this question goes to you as well. I'd love some specifics on how you would bring jobs to Connecticut and what type of jobs, in what industries, what areas.
Great, thank you very much. Two quick pieces that are part of my economic plan. First is investing in our infrastructure, and it directly relates to jobs in this way. Our roads and highways are currently rated worse than the nation. And so what does that do from an economic perspective? Entrepreneurs who want to start a small business, entrepreneurs who want to grow an existing business, our larger employers as well, people thinking about coming to our state are looking at our roads and highways. We need to make investments in our infrastructure to give predictability and stability, to give that comfort level to our entrepreneurs who are going to come and grow jobs. It's critical from that perspective. Second is the thousands of jobs that we're currently leaving on the table because we can't currently get those projects out the door and on the street through our Department of Transportation. We need to get more efficient, as I was talking about earlier, from every department, including DOT. We can't do it without funding, so I do call for tolls in my current economic plan, but I also call for a Connecticut infrastructure bank to bring some private capital, leveraging some state-contributed equity to get those jobs. And I'm talking about thousands of jobs in construction, thousands of skilled worker jobs, jobs like Local 478, our operating engineers who I've visited a number of times, where they have an apprenticeship program, where they improve lives, bringing people through that other 4-year degree to improve lives and let people earn while they learn. Second is investments in small businesses of all sizes really, but small businesses first. Yes, through grants and loans through our Department of Economic and Community Development, but also through incubators. Incubators like the incubator I visited on my jobs tour, BioCT in Groton. Incubators in our cities, incubators in our economically distressed communities, so those who are in those communities can see hope in starting a small business. Investing in our existing businesses that already exist here in Connecticut. Forget about Amazon. We didn't make that list. Let's invest in the 6,000 technology companies that are already here in our state, helping them to scale up their businesses. With just 10 jobs, it's 60,000 jobs right there. You beat that 50,000 jobs. And you do it with provider networks in place. And investing in our large employers as well, and building the environment that makes sense for them to keep their jobs here, grow jobs here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cronin, if you, did he not? You started. Mr. Cronin, if you're fortunate enough to be elected as governor, how would you approach your relationship with the legislature, particularly if it has a political makeup like the current one?
Look, in the current makeup where you've got an 18-18 Senate split and a House that's awfully close together, you've got to be able to build those relationships across the aisle. You've got to be willing to stay at the table even when it gets tough. And on a lot of these things, I would say, look at my record. I told you about the fiscal crisis we faced. We had a city that could have easily satisfied the requirements for bankruptcy. We had to build partnerships to deal with that. We built partnerships with our unions around the table and made really significant change. We built partnerships with our business community, re-engaged our biggest companies in the life of the city and got them to put skin in the game for the first time in a long time. And we re-engaged with legislators, not just our own delegation, but around the state and on both sides of the aisle, which is why in a year that a lot of people didn't think it could be done, and with the help of some of the legislators here, we were able to work with a bipartisan legislature to get a set of tools that would allow us to put our capital city on the path to a stable and sustainable future for the first time in a long, long time. So I've got a record of building those relationships, building those partnerships, and I know what it means to stay at the table even when it gets tough. I'd like to just answer briefly the last question too, because what's more important than creating jobs? I talked about transportation at the start. That is the single most important thing. You put New Haven within an hour or an hour and 10 minutes of New York, it's a game changer for Bridgeport, it's a game changer for Fairfield, every town represented here. But if you also use some of that toll revenue to invest in the commuter lines, Danbury, Waterbury, Shoreline East, New Haven to Springfield, you open up growth potential all throughout this state. People are getting priced out of New York and Boston every day, and not just people, businesses are getting priced out. When that startup firm is starting in Brooklyn, New York, or Cambridge, Mass., they can't afford to scale up there, but in the Route 8 corridor they could if they were able to get there. In Danbury area they could if they were able to get there. So that is the single most important thing. Hopefully I'll get a chance to talk to you later about what we've done to promote innovation with our companies in the city of Hartford.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, same question?
We have a lot of challenges in the state, let's face it. Service delivery, the emperor has no clothes anymore. But one of our biggest challenges is the fact that it seems like people want to be just chucking rocks at each other as opposed to coming together, listening to each other, and creating solutions. I've always been able to do this, a progressive problem solver. When we were getting our way out of the fiscal crisis, I didn't realize this, but one of the most important things I did is I brought the minority leader of the council over to the superintendent's office and met on Friday mornings with the superintendent, the chair of the board, and the minority leader board. The beginning discussions were, hey, what are you doing this weekend? What are the names of your kids and grandkids? It built a trust. It built a working relationship so that when the proverbial you-know-what started hitting the fan in budget, we were able to deal with each other and come to agreements and create solutions. The Blueback Square development, by the way, really, really tough. It was 50 hours of public hearings. It was a huge lift. It passed unanimously at the time when I was running for state senate against the minority leader, because we came together. There were things that were bigger than us. It was relationships that made that happen. I spent 12 years in the General Assembly. 6 as counsel to Moira Lyons and the House Democrats, 6 in the state senate. I not only know where the bathrooms are, I understand the people, the process, and the policy. The next governor has to be less of a my way or the highway policy wonk and more of a convener of people, making collaborations, making connections, opening up the residence for pizza on a Friday night, building those relationships so that we can come together during tough times and make those decisions. I've done that. We can do this.
Thank you. Ms. Bysewicz, the same question?
Thank you. too. I would take a collaborative approach. I think that's very important, and that's why I was successful as Secretary of the State in getting bipartisan support for our new voting system, and as the chair of one of the large committees in our state legislature when I was the Democratic chair and I had a Senate Republican co-chair. The only way you get things done is if you build consensus in a collaborative way. And I think one of the important things to revitalize our economy and connect the leadership approach is making a budget that is fair and honest and is on time and has bipartisan support, because that will help bring predictability and stability to our state government. Companies aren't going to want to come from out of state if they cannot rely on government doing its work, and businesses who are in our state need predictability so they can plan for the future. And to answer the question about how do we bring good paying jobs to our state, well, we invest in our infrastructure through toll revenue. We fix our aging roads and bridges, invest in public transportation and rail, and that will spur economic development. But one more idea that will raise up every family in our state and help every family is to pass a pay equity bill so that women can earn dollar for dollar what men make. And it's simple to do. Just prohibit employers from asking what you made at your last job, because that institutionalizes discrimination against women and people of color, and that would be my top priority. Thank you.
Ms. Beaumont, what ideas do you have for incentivizing towns and regions to help the state decrease costs by regionalizing services?
I think one of the most significant savings, Steve, will be in terms of all of our local towns, 169 towns. This has been said before, 169 mayors, 169 separate infrastructures, administrative, and I would do that not by fiat, I would do that through incentives. And I would give folks incentives to work together going forward. I do the same thing when it comes to working with the legislature. I think you need a governor, it's not a CEO, but it is a leader. And you need a leader who listens and listens and doesn't insist on taking all the credit. And I think that's how we start mending the fences up at Hartford, working together. Look, they're frustrated on both sides of the aisle. And the legislature's not capable, but they can raise a rate a little bit here, or they can cut out this line item, but they're looking for a governor who will come forward with the big ideas in terms of how we reform, how we raise revenues, what we do on pensions, put together a package that we can get behind so we don't every 2 years have to go through this budgetary hell. And you do that by listening, you do that by not taking credit. You know, hey, Themis, pretty good idea. I mean, there are ways that you can get more people to the table going forward. And I've done that. I've done that for the last 10 years, ever since I challenged Dan Malloy in that primary where I said we have to make big changes now or Connecticut will continue to fall back. I've been a professor at Central Connecticut State University. You know, there we had GE. We got them to the table. We got the Republican and the Democratic legislators. We got business and labor. And why did GE leave? It wasn't taxes, by the way. It was transportation. We got business and labor together. Why are there thousands of good-paying jobs going begging? Because we're not training people for that advanced manufacturing work. We're not sending teachers to go to the inner cities. We found that there was a lot of common ground if you listen, work with people, and don't insist on all the taking the credit for yourself.
Thank you. Mr. Ganem, same question?
I do think there are ways we can and we should incentivize in order to save costs in between cities and towns, 169. I also think, even reflecting on it, although I'm not maybe that appreciative of it, we all do really love the unique aspects of living in our own city and town. And Fairfield's like that, Easton's like that, to a certain extent, Bridgeport's like that, and we have to respect that. And in ways in which we can rise to a level of commonality, working together with Mike Tetro and me and Trumbull, we do that. I think there are ways in which where economies of scale make sense, We need to look at those as ways to save money. We're not going to solve, at least at this point, with incremental change on an agreement between municipalities or even a state budget dollar-wise by that. I do like the ideas, and I think Bridgeport and the region prides ourselves on some of the regional magnet schools that we have. The Regional Agriculture School in Black Rock, which teaches marine biology and services many communities. And those are the type of things that I think bring us together as communities. The recent chess match, if you will, between Bridgeport and Fairfield students and how we build on that type of relationship is more and more of that, I think, is what bonds us across these intangible or intangible lines between city and town, and especially in somewhere there's more affluent and less affluent. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Mr. Connolly, should the President of the United States be elected by popular vote, and will you support the National Popular Vote Compact?
Yes. Yes, I would. And, you know, we saw over the last several presidential elections how the popular vote would have been critical. And so, yes, I would. And so I'll take the remainder of my time to talk about the leadership aspect, both when it comes to our towns and cities and when it comes to working with our legislature. You know, one of the leaders that I like to follow is General Marty Dempsey. He's the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff down at the Pentagon. And he sends out some tweets. These are good tweets. But one of his particular tweets that really grabbed me is called radical inclusion. And that's exactly the style of leadership that I bring to the table, that I would bring to the office of governor. Both with our legislature, which means, what does it mean? What does radical inclusion mean? It really means bringing people to the table from all different walks of life, from all geographic locations here in Connecticut, from all different backgrounds, men and women, every race, every creed, every religion, to get the best ideas, to bring those best ideas to bear and to implement them in the best way. Does that approach take longer sometimes? Yes, it does. It takes energy, it takes communication, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a much more successful approach going forward. As I was the Commissioner of Department of Veterans Affairs, that's how I led. You know, we had to make some tough changes because our budget went down each year. We had to modify the program fee for our veterans who were living in our temporary housing facility. It was a process that was in place for 8+ years. I didn't just come out and say, tomorrow it's going to be changed. We proposed it to our veteran residents. I had multiple town hall style meetings. I heard some good ideas, by the way, and incorporated those nuggets into the proposal going forward. We presented the new proposal, and we didn't say it's starting tomorrow, we said it's starting in a couple of months. We brought new wraparound services to bear, additional case support management to help them identify their goals and objectives and remove the barriers to achieving them, and we were much more successful going forward. So that's how you lead going forward, both with our towns and cities and with our legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, the same question. Should the President of the United States be elected by popular vote? And will you support the National Popular Vote Compact?
Yes, definitely. And just think, if we had had that in November, we wouldn't be where we are today. Now, that other question about what I would do in Hartford to break some of the deadlock is really in your hands, because we have a popular vote in Connecticut, and we've got to turn that legislature more blue, and you can do that. It makes it a lot easier for me when I'm gone, if we've got